Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone who's able to join us here on this wonderful Friday at 2 p.m. I'm sure this is crammed into your busy schedules here as the school year comes to an end, but I wanted to thank everyone that's able to join. Oh, can't hear us. Thank you.
I can hear you, Jennifer.
Perfect. Audio working. Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you. I apologize for that. Welcome everyone to this Maricopa County School Superintendent hosted webinar on reconciling cash with the County Treasurer's Office. I wanted to thank everyone for being here and taking time out of their day. We've got two wonderful presenters, Miss Jill Shaw and Miss Karin Smith with Heinfeldmeech, that are going to be going over how to reconcile your items through the county cash with having the change in agency web platforms. I do just want to go over a couple housekeeping items. We do have a lot of things to cover, so I just want to make sure that we stay on time and respect everyone's time and also end on time. Please use the chat if you have any IT problems. Thank you so much for those who said that they couldn't hear us, and then also those who said that they could hear us. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them into the Q&A at the top. That's going to be where we can gather all of these questions that you might have and be able to answer them all at the end. Or what Karen, Jill, and I have come to fruition is being able to export these and gather them all and be able to create kind of like an FAQ sheet that we're able to send out to hopefully get everybody's questions answered. Again, there's going to be quite a few people on this webinar. We want to make sure that your questions do get answered. So feel free to go ahead and put them in the Q&A section at any time point of the webinar. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. So again, if you don't know me, I am Jennifer Pease. I am with Maricopa County School Superintendent's Office. I am actually the Financial Systems Operations Manager. So if you knew Mike Martinez, I am actually his replacement. And I started just at the late end of November. And then I'll let Jill and Karen introduce themselves.
Hi, so I'm Jill Shaw. I'm with HeinfeldMeech, and I work out of our Scottsdale office, and I work on the audit side of things. So I recognize a lot of names on the call, and it's great to see you all on Friday. And so I'll be talking about it, kind of from the audit and the reconciling perspective.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Karin Smith, and I see a lot of familiar names coming across the screen as everybody's coming into the webinar, and I'm excited to be with you this afternoon as well. So hopefully we're going to be able to get some good resources out to everybody on just overall cash reconciliation and some of the more unique situations going on within Maricopa County as well.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. We'll go ahead and get started. So I'll go ahead and start us off with the challenges, or with the Maricopa County Treasurer's Office, and some of the challenges resulting from that conversion of the agency web portals. So as some of you might know, if not all of you, that the county agency web converted right around November 7th of 2025. So the looks of the agency web portal had changed, some of the features had changed, and then some of you, as you delved in there, you noticed that some of the information had also changed in the system. With that, there was some system transition issues, as you might have found, that included any of your warrant transfer files or your FX files that you would upload if you were doing vouchers. This created some barriers that we had, being able to reconcile timely while also just being able to look at your cash balances on a daily or a weekly or even a monthly basis. Some users experienced limited training and preparation when this transition happened. I do believe that there was a couple emails that went out of the treasurer's office that were letting us know that this was changing and transitioning. But there were some, as with any new system, some conversion issues and also with some users' experience. With that, there's also some available reports that we used to have that we no longer had anymore. So as the treasurer's office is still continuously working on these every single day, you'll notice that some are being added in there. But when they first converted over, you were like, oh my gosh, there is no reports, and the ones that I used to pull are no longer in there. But rest assured that the treasurer's office is still working on these every day, trying to get them created and ready to be published online for everyone to access their districts. And I know it might seem small and minute, but one of the biggest challenges that I heard from some of the districts, non-accounting and accounting, were the warrant images were gone. This is something that I did let the treasurer's office know, that there were quite a few districts that did utilize these warrant images to show when something was paid, who had signed on the back, the day that it was paid. So just again, rest assured that these are on the list of items that the treasurer office is trying to fix, but these were just some of the front-facing challenges that not only the county had, that we had, but also the districts, pilots included, had when going into this new agency web portal. So with, again, some of those transitions, some capacity limitations and reconciling outlooks. My office, so I've got 3 itinerant business managers currently right now. They're all fairly new, so they are still learning how to navigate through the new agency web portal, how to extract information you needed to reconcile these items. We're currently operating under significant constraints, a little bit with the conversion, as is everybody else. Again, when a new system rolls out, there's always going to be some bumps and hiccups along the way. So we do just try to make the best of it. And as well as everyone else, we just try to utilize the information that we can to make sure that we are providing the service of still reconciling the districts that are hosted by the county. And again, as I had mentioned, I've got a team of new itinerant business managers, which I do believe they are on this call as well. They're also simultaneously learning how to reconcile cash, as well as balancing their day-to-day operational duties by assisting and supporting the districts that call into our office. With that, each new day is something brand new, and we absolutely love it. And it also brings new challenges for us. And again, this is also with originating kind of from the county treasurer's office and their agency web portal. But again, we try to make the best of it. We want to make sure that we're trying to stay on top of this as much as we can. But again, with that comes limitations. And that is when I'm going to throw it over to Karin and Jill to kind of talk about those items.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So what we wanted to tackle is Jill and I are going to share with you just we're going to start with some background information, because a lot of people are saying, well, what does this mean? With this conversion and the limitation to some of the information, what does that mean for our school districts here within Maricopa County? So we're going to take a step back and not just talk about here within Maricopa County, but just the concept of reconciling cash with treasure. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the compliance areas and some of the things that obviously kind of get us as the audit firm anxious about it, or even in a consulting capacity, some of the needs that are around that compliance framework. And then from there, what we want to do is walk you through that outside of having those nice, perfect reports that we used to have access to. What we're going to do then is Jill's going to actually take us through of how to gather some of the underlying data from agency web. So then more specific to Maricopa County, how can we actually get to the underlying data so that reconciliations can take place? So, but before we get to there, we really need to talk a bit about the compliance framework and understanding that component of it. So Jennifer, if you can jump to the next slide. So let's start by just talking a little bit about reconciliation itself and the compliance framework and what's required. So I think we all are intimately familiar with what's within USFR. So within Uniform System of Financial Records, we know that bank reconciliations are not optional. And with the county treasurer serving as our primary bank, we are required to ensure that as a school district that we are reconciling ourselves to the bank on a monthly basis. So we have to maintain that documentation, and the challenge is like, okay, what documentation are we using? So we're going to talk a bit more about that as well. But USFR does require that we have a reconciliation that's performed on a monthly basis. And that really is the foundation from really, if you look at our audit standards of what management is responsible for when it comes to the concept of reconciliation. So it really ties back to the internal controls, and ultimately management is responsible for ensuring that those internal controls are in place. And the reason why we have those internal controls is so that we can ultimately identify and detect any errors, and they can be prevented, detected, we can correct them. We know that there are needs for adjustments. Part of doing a reconciliation is to identify if something was coded incorrectly, was recorded incorrectly, that it gives us an opportunity to make those corrections timely and to prevent potential issues from happening as well. If we see that something is being recorded in the wrong account, we're able to address that early on and make that correction moving forward. So it's not just a best practice, it's really the baseline for our compliance requirements. It's, when we hear about, we've heard Sarah Kirk talk about the three C's of doom. We've got comp ads, capital assets, and cash reconciliations. Cash reconciliations is really the underlying foundation for our compliance, because we need to ensure that the records that our districts are operating under are reconciled back to the bank. So whether that be your local bank accounts or with the county treasurer. So Jennifer, if you can jump to the next slide. So when we talk about the compliance framework and understanding compliance, we have to also understand some of the uniqueness to our Arizona school districts. So we hear the terminology accounting responsibility districts, non-accounting responsibility districts, also referred to as pilot versus non-pilot districts. And then there's also the concept of hosted versus non-hosted districts. So within each of these, how we approach or how we tackle that compliance is going to look a little bit different. So as we start talking a little bit about what an accounting responsible district is, so essentially within Arizona Revised Statute, there is a provision that allows a school district to apply for that accounting responsibility. And what that means is that the school district is assuming that responsibility of all of their accounting records. And they're essentially working direct from their school district to the county treasurer. And the county school superintendent's office is essentially not part of that equation. So as an accounting responsible district, or a pilot district that we often refer to it as, the school district is ultimately responsible for processing all of their own warrants, processing all their deposits, and the school district is then sending those files directly to the county treasurer. First, as we jump to the next slide, a non-accounting responsible district, or a district that works under the umbrella of the county school superintendent's office, that's where the CSS is then providing that service. They're doing certain pieces of that compliance requirement on behalf of the school district. So the CSS, the county school superintendent's office, then assists the school district in that reconciliation process, and really assists in the overall processing and helps build some of that internal control framework that we have, the segregation of duties of warrant processing and posting of deposits. The CSS office is involved directly with actually sending those files, those file transfers over to the county treasurer on behalf of the school district. So I think understanding the differences, you all know if you are a pilot district or if you are a non-pilot district, what that really means is the role that the CSS plays on behalf of your school district. Then the other term that we need to make sure that we understand is the concept of being hosted versus non-hosted districts. So for Maricopa County specifically, what it means to be hosted is essentially Jennifer and her team, you log into Horizon in order to get to your accounting data. And you, within a hosted environment, you can be directly synced to your CSS Office General Ledger like you are with Maricopa County, or you can be, not hosted by your county, where your data is separate and you have to transmit that to not just the CSS, but then the CSS has to send that information up to the county treasurer. So here in Maricopa County, if you are what we refer to being on the county box, so you're logging in, you're a non-accounting responsible district and you're logging into Horizon into the county box, you and Jennifer's team are looking at the exact same data. So when Jill's and Annette and the whole crew, now the new itinerants, we've got Brittany and Andy and Chris, and they are posting transactions. They are posting it directly into your general ledger. So you're working under the same general ledger system itself. And you can have a school district who is a non-accounting responsibility district, a non-pilot district, and also not hosted by the county school superintendent's office. We have a couple of those here in Maricopa County. Maricopa County also hosts districts outside of Maricopa County, and that's really just more of an IT arrangement that you have, an information technology agreement that you have with some other districts outside of Maricopa County. They're not going in and posting your deposits. So I know I see a couple of names coming across the log and you're like, wait a minute, I don't have to post my deposits. Yes, you do. So ignore that concept for some of the districts that are hosted from outside of Maricopa County by Maricopa County. But really understanding that the concept of a non-accounting responsibility school district that's being hosted by the county school superintendent's office. The important component to understand is really where does that ownership fall with the reconciliations? If you look at just look at the base language that's in USFR, the USFR says that the school district is ultimately responsible. So what we want to make sure is, even though we have the relationship with the county school superintendent's office, I'm not squeezing Jennifer's team out of the equation here, but we want to make sure that the school districts understand ultimately when it comes down to the compliance requirements, whose financials are these? The financials are the school district's financials. They are not the county's financials. So we want to make sure that school districts have a good understanding of what that responsibility is and how they can make sure that they are owning the responsibilities and have the knowledge and skills in order to perform those reconciliations with the support of the county school superintendent's office. So regardless of if you are an accounting responsibility district, a non-accounting responsibility, a pilot district versus a non-pilot district, understanding how to tackle that reconciliation with or without the support of your county school superintendent's office is critical. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to actually have Jill take you through a walkthrough of what does that reconciliation actually look like? How can a school district reconcile with and without the role of the CSS office? And then we're going to show specifically then within Maricopa County with the new agency web and how to actually extract that data out of agency web, again, with and without reports, so that you can see how you can essentially tackle that reconciliation responsibility. So I'm going to turn it over to Jill, and she's going to walk us through this.
All right, thank you, Karen. So when we first began discussions with the county schools office and the county treasurer, our biggest concern was that we helped the districts that we work with formulate a proactive approach and provide some of these, real life examples and tools and resources that you could utilize to complete your own reconciliation in the event that the county schools office doesn't have that capacity to prepare the reconciliations like maybe that they have in the past. Because as all of you on the call have been through an audit, and as an auditor, we know that when reconciliations are not completed, they do have big audit implications, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the presentation. But when we talk about internal controls, whenever someone asks me, what's the most important internal control that an entity can have, I always say cash reconciliations. Because if you think about all the transactions that flow through an organization, money in, money out, reconciliation is really your tool to know that you balance to the bank. And until it's balanced in full, even if there's a small unreconciled difference, that could be the result of two large things, a large debit and a large credit, that net to a balance. And until it's reconciled, really down to the penny, you don't know for sure that it matches. So just want to reiterate there that it is a very important internal control. And so that's why we're going to go through this walkthrough today to hopefully help provide some resources that you can utilize to gain reports from Agency Web and complete a reconciliation that you can then give to your audit team to be able to review. And we're in a good time frame, with the June 30th year end, fiscal year end, still being about a month and a half out, and then we have a couple of months of the encumbrance period. Audits are still several months out, so it's a good time to really be talking about this and getting prepared so that you have enough lead-in time before the audit process. But with that, I'll move on to the next slide, please. The first thing that you're going to want to do during the reconciliation process is to create the fund ledger, the treasurer fund ledger. And this is essentially the bank statement. So if you think about any account that you reconcile, you're going to get that bank statement, whether it's from Wells Fargo or Chase Bank. And so the county treasurer's records are no different. In some of the reports that the treasurer used to provide, the fund ledger was one of those reports that as of today, is not available right now. The treasurer is diligently working on getting those reports, but in the meantime, I have some steps that you can walk through on Agency Web to create that treasurer fund ledger. So you have the bank statement that shows beginning balances, ending balances, and all of the transactions for the month in every county fund. So on the next slide, I have here a screenshot from Agency Web, and this is specific to Maricopa County, but this particular example, but in any county, you're going to need some sort of report from the county treasurer that shows what those cash balances are by fund. So in particular in Maricopa County, in Agency Web, you are going to start going through this list here of clicking on inquiry here, and then GL accounts. And then from there, you can leave all of the fields blank with the exception of dates. And in here, I have a month end or a transaction date too of March 31st, because at the time that I was playing with the reports and the inquiries that were available, I was trying to reconcile a district through March 31st. Starting at the beginning of the fiscal year, but this date can be whatever month you are wanting to reconcile or through year end. But once you've determined that, you're going to click on Export to CSV. And then on the next slide, once you have that CSV file, then you're going to want to save it as an Excel file so that you can manipulate the file with things like filters and all of that. And what I found most helpful is through another query that I'm going to show you a little bit later, you'll be able to get month-end cash balances for each treasurer fund. But in order to get all of the activity, you do need to do this fund ledger. And what I found helpful was to complete these additional steps to further break down that Excel file so that you had a different tab for each treasurer fund. And, with fund accounting, you are reconciling 1 month, but it's kind of like 20 mini reconciliations for each of the various treasurer funds. So what I did was I formulated these steps, and I used Copilot as a tool to put these steps into Copilot so that it would format the Excel document for me. The only one that I wasn't able to get to work in Copilot was step number 9 to modify the balances to get a running balance. But in the event that you don't have a tool such as Copilot, all of these steps can be done manually. I would say when I put this into Copilot, it saved me, it did all of the steps in about 5 minutes, whereas it probably would have taken an hour without Copilot. So not drastic differences, but anywhere where you can save a few minutes, we try to do that. So this really you'll see an example in a few slides of what this looks like for one particular tab. But as noted on the next tab, you don't necessarily need to do those previous steps, but I think that it will make reconciling much easier because once you download the CSV file and turn it into Excel, you're going to have all the transactions, and you can simply filter that by the treasurer fund, which is indicated as TAF in the document. But when you filter that, it doesn't provide running balances. So in the old treasurer ledgers that were available on Agency Web, they had a line item for beginning balances. So what you could do is you could export that to Excel and filter by file or filter by fund. and have a mini bank statement for each fund that gave you beginning and end. And under this new format, you won't have that. You'll have all the transactions, but because you don't have a beginning balance, you don't have an ending running balance that will agree to the next query that I'm going to show you. So that is another reason that I found it very helpful to break it down where each fund has its own tab. So before we get into the next agency web report, I wanted to just point out that step one is really figuring out what sort of format you're going to use. So you'll notice on the following example that the template that I used looks identical to the reconciliations that you've received in the past from the county schools office. And all I did was convert that to Excel and then input formulas in there so that it calculated the differences. But I was trying just to not reinvent the wheel and start with something that was already proven to work and already formulated by Treasurer Fund. And so I think it ended up working really well. But on the next slide, the next thing that you're going to do is take your treasurer balance at month end and put that onto your reconciliation that you're doing. So this is the balance that's going to come directly from Agency Web and directly from the county treasurer. And on the next slide are the steps to be able to do that. So the first steps in Agency Web that I did create every single transaction that happened for the district for that month or that year. Now, what this set of instructions is going to do is just going to summarize all of that to the fund level. So you'll get a nice, 1 or 2 page view of what all the different month-end balances are for each fund. The important thing to point out here, though, is that it will be in the way that the treasurer, I don't know if it's a chart of accounts, but the coding that they use at the treasurer. So I have an example there of a string of codes for one particular fund at a district. And the fourth code is going to be the one that you're going to be looking at the most. It's going to always start with a 5, but then the next 3 digits indicate which fund in the district ledger that you'll find. So Fund 001 corresponds to Fund 001 or M&O on the district side. So that's just a little bit of a nuance to get used to if you're not used to reading those treasurer reports. And then once you have that on the next slide, what it's going to give you is every single fund for the district in this format here. So this balance, this $477,000 was the balance at March 31st for the E-rate fund for this particular district. So the fourth code in, that's where you can see that 5374. And I purposely created this example using a fund that didn't have a lot of activity, just so that we could see at a high level how it would work. But the first step, or I guess the second step I have here, is this treasurer balance that's highlighted on the treasurer side is going to just come straight from Agency Web from that query that you did. So that will give you that balance. And then on the next slide, I wanted to provide this crosswalk. Many of you have probably seen this before, but what it does is give you a nice roll-up of how the funds correspond on the district side versus the treasurer side. So on some funds, they are the exact same. So M&O, 001 and 001, those two match on both sides. But funds like 002 and 201 have multiple funds on the district side that roll up into the treasurer fund of 002. So this is a handy thing to refer back to so that you know which funds you're reconciling or which funds the treasurer has included on their side during the reconciliation. And then on the next slide, the next number that you're going to enter into your reconciliation is your district balance. Now, what I did was I pulled this from a detailed general ledger from the district's accounting software. So whether that be Visions or whatever you use, that's going to come from your system. So I had a district pull their detailed general ledger, and then I filtered for object 103 to get just those cash balances. And when I hovered over debits and credits, it gave me the net cash balance. Now that's kind of a going to give you more information than you initially need. You can also just run a cash balance report, in this case for March 31st by fund that summarizes it. But ultimately you will need the detailed GL so that you have all of the detail to be able to compare what cleared on the treasurer side versus what's cleared on the district side. So I think at the end of the day, you'll end up running both reports anyway, but how you start, it's up to you if you want to run a summary one and a detailed one. So then on the next slide, here is where you'll input that school balance that's pulled from the district's accounting records. And then I think on the next slide, let's see this is the example, and I apologize if this is, kind of small to read on a screen right now. Hopefully afterward there'll be a PDF version of the presentation that's provided that you can blow this up if you need to see some of the detail. But here's where you can see that I took the detailed general ledger and then it's filtered for 0103 in object, and then in this case it's also filtered for fund 374 so that we can just see the activity of just that E-rate fund. And here's what I meant about hovering over both of those columns so that down here it gives you the sum of cash balances at the end of that month in that fund. But is the detailed approach where it's going to give you every single transaction rather than just the summary. So that's how I chose to do that in this particular case, because I knew I was going to ultimately need that detail anyway. And then on the next slide, the next step is to investigate differences. So, you may get lucky enough, and once you put in that treasurer balance and your district balance for some funds, it may match. But in a lot of cases, it likely won't. There are expected to probably be timing differences, or just other things that need to be investigated. So in terms of investigating where to find the difference, I would first start by looking at timing differences, because when I did this particular example, that was the number one thing that I noted, was just as the county schools is processing revenues and vouchers that are coming through, they may be a little bit ahead or behind of where the treasurer is posting that same information. So likely it's just due to timing differences that one has posted it and not the other. So that's where I would first start by looking for differences. Now, in the event that that doesn't cover all your differences, then you really have to go transaction by transaction to identify where there might be additional differences. And that's where you need that detailed general ledger on the district side and the treasurer fund ledger on the treasurer side to really be able to match up transaction by transaction. And the biggest thing is that the treasurer groups things differently than maybe the district does. And so you'll be able to see on some of these next slides how on the treasurer side, sometimes there's several numbers that get added up that then agree to the same number on the district side. And you really, unfortunately, there's not a super quick solution to be able to, other than just going transaction by transaction, but that just highlights the importance of keeping up with these on a monthly basis. Once you get caught up on reconciliations, then it's much easier to identify reconciling items when they're current and you're not looking for something that maybe occurred months ago. So on the next slide, I have an example here. So the goal with each fund's reconciliation is that you want the variance here to be 0. And I apologize, I just see now that I'm missing some formulas in here those differences should carry over here. But the ending, you always want your variance to be 0 here, and for this school balance and treasurer balance to match. Now in this example, the reason why I don't have these variance is that The treasurer, you might know, has posted some interest payments. When you log into agency webs, it talks about some interest payments that they posted recently, and then they backdated to March. So when I had first done this the first week of April, it was just this reconciling item in green. And then when I went in last week, there were 3 new reconciling items for interest that had been posted. So this is likely interest for November, December, January, February, or something along those lines where they're getting caught up on posting that interest to all the different funds. But on the next slide, you can see that 2039 on the treasurer side, it's at the very top because this works backwards from date where July 2025 is at the bottom, working up to March 31st. And so it was easy to see when I first did this that it was off $2,000, and I could see, oh, it's right there. It's that last interest payment that was posted on the treasurer side that the county schools office hasn't had a chance to post yet on the district side. So I think you'll have a lot of funds that are, it's that easy. You'll be able to easily identify those reconciling items, hopefully, and it's just as because of timing things. But here you can also see this is what the detailed fund ledger looks like on the treasurer side. Once I ran those instructions through Copilot, it gave each fund its own tab. And then it has a running balance where this balance here agrees to the query that was done out of agency web. And that's how you know that your bank statement matches up to the query. So then on the next step, I wanted to just show you, if let's say the $2,000 wasn't the only difference, and then you had to really just start going transaction by transaction. This is kind of the process that you would go through. This is from the district's GL. And what I've done here is, in this case, I've color-coded every transaction so that on the next slide, on the treasurer side, you can see which transactions match up to the district side. And that's all it really is matching up. And this is where some of you may be able to figure out a more efficient way to do this. But when I was doing it, I really just kind of went transaction by transaction to figure out what matched and what didn't match. So you can see here the only item that's not color-coded at the date that I had done this was that last interest payment that's here on the treasurer side, but isn't yet on the district side. So then on the next slide, that previous example for Fund 374 E-rate is for what I was calling a non-clearing fund. So the reconciliation process is slightly different for clearing funds. And so the clearing funds are Fund 30 and 40, where as you send payroll and accounts payables vouchers to the treasurer, that's where the warrants clear. So those funds don't appear on the district's accounting records, but they still need to be reconciled to ensure that what's in those funds that the treasurer agrees to outstanding warrants, because all that's really going through Fund 30 and 40 is when the district sends a voucher, it adds funds to those funds, and then as checks clear, it takes it out of the fund. So theoretically, the ending balance should agree to outstanding warrants. And so on the next few slides, I have some steps of how you can run reports from agency web to help investigate why maybe it doesn't agree to outstanding warrants. So here, the first thing that you're going to want to do is run a warrant listing. So on these, using these instructions, you can export a file to Excel and then be able to filter it to fund 50/30 or 50/40, depending on which fund that you're reconciling. And then from there, if you want outstanding warrants, you're going to do step 8 here, where you are looking at issued, and honestly, you'll see in the next couple of slides, when I was trying to reconcile Fund 30 and 40 for this particular district, and based on feedback that we're hearing from some districts, warrants do sound to be a place where differences are being identified, where there are potentially some warrants that aren't clearing on the treasurer's side that the district has on their side. And so really the only way to identify it is to go date by date and match up your records, the district's records, with the treasurer's. So then on the next slide, here's kind of what that would start to look like. So you have first the treasurer balance, and that's pulled from the same place that we did before for Fund 374, except for this time it's Fund 030. And so that's going to be the treasurer balance. And then here, the school balance is always going to be 0 because that isn't recorded on the district's accounting records. Now, in this case, you'll notice that there's an unreconciled difference. So as I mentioned, even when I went through these steps, I wasn't able to identify down to a 0 balance. With a reasonable amount of time, I was trying to, see how, if a district started doing this, how would they try to do it efficiently? And this is where I landed. So the first thing that we're going to look at here is how to obtain this outstanding warrant balance. So if you go to the next slide, when you run those instructions for the outstanding warrants, it will generate this warrant listing here. And so as you can see, I filtered it for the fund and filtered by issued. And when I hover over, that's where I get the $32,000 in outstanding warrants that appeared on the reconciliation. So then on the next slide, as you saw on that previous reconciliation, there were other reconciling items besides just outstanding warrants. Now you may get lucky and your outstanding warrants are the only reconciling item you have, but I suspect there will likely be something more, because you can tell, particularly around that November 7th date when the system conversion happened, there were some things that had to be done manually there. And so with any system conversion, it took a week or so to get things running smoothly. So on the next couple of slides, I have examples of, once you've input your outstanding warrant, how you might go about investigating what other kinds of reconciling items you have. And you'll see in here, I used pivot tables because there is just so much data. As you are looking at all of this, the pivot tables were essential to be able to help group things by date and then be able to more easily compare them to the treasurer records. So this first one is on the payroll side, how to take your detailed treasurer fund ledger and agree that to payroll transfers from the district to the treasurer. So through this filtering and creating the pivot table, then you'll be able to agree the vouchers that you sent to the treasurer, and does that match up on the treasurer side. So on the next slide, this first spreadsheet is from the district side. So what I did here was I took the general ledger and I did those instructions of filtering by just the payroll journal. And then I created a pivot table to filter by voucher. So these row labels here correspond with the voucher. And you can see the 26 pays so far. And then, so this gives me the numbers that, the amounts that the district sent to the treasurer with each voucher. And then on the next slide is the treasurer side. So there you can see that filtered by 50/30 and all of the credits coming in, and all of these numbers matched right up to the voucher, with the exception of these items highlighted in yellow. So those items highlighted in yellow, I added to the reconciliation to say these are is a reconciling item. I don't know in particular why this is a reconciling item. You know, that would still need to be investigated as far as how to fix it, but at least it's been identified as part of the difference. Oh, and here I didn't point out too, but it's also filtered by payroll transfer. Sorry, Jennifer. And so then on the next slide, that was the payroll side. And so then you have your non-payroll warrants, how to agree those to the treasurer ledger. So you're going to start with that same warrant listing that you downloaded from the treasurer, from Agency Web, and follow these steps to do the filtering and create the pivot table. And then you'll see how you can agree. So if we go to the next tab, this is from that paid warrant listing. So this is the warrant listing where we have ran through those steps of the filtering and the pivoting. And what this has done is it shows a pivot table that's going to summarize each of the warrants that were posted each day. So this is going to be on the treasurer side, what cleared. Then on the next slide is going to be from the treasurer fund ledger. So this is the treasurer bank statement, where then you can agree each day's of, you know, it'll say 22 warrants paid on December 11th. You'll be able to agree that amount over to the warrant listing. So I did that for every day from November to 3/31 and was able to identify this difference here in red as something that was showing on the treasurer side, but was not showing up on the warrant listing. And as you can see, these dates are from early November. So right when the system conversion happened, there's some manual adjustments. And in this case, it said 7 warrants paid, but I wasn't able to determine which 7 warrants. So that is one of those just things that we're noticing and running into where, for the most part, everything reconciles, but at the point where things switched over, in particular during that time frame, there might be some things that you're identifying. So again, I don't know exactly how you would necessarily fix that, but at least it's identified, and then you can work with the treasurer going forward on how to fix that. All right, so then on the next slide, so as you can see, there's some potential challenges with all of this. At this point, the reconciliations are likely months behind. The last reconciliations that were done, for the most part, we're hearing were from October. So, you know, it's just important to note that every month needs to be reconciled, not just June for audit purposes. And I think that, you know, you'll find you need to do that anyway in order to be caught up to June. But just the time frame in and of itself creates a challenge that, like anything in life, the more that you keep up with it, it's easier to, makes it more manageable. So now that several months have gone by, you might be looking back to transactions and trying to research things from November. I would recommend checking into Agency Web, pulling that up on a frequent basis, because as Jennifer mentioned, the treasurer is working diligently on a daily basis to get these reports to be available on Agency Web. And so things are changing frequently. Things like the interest postings being caught up are being looked at. And so it's a very, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces with this to keep up with. So, so check back frequently. And but one thing we wanted to point out is that even as reports become available, things like warrant reports and cash balance reports, they may ease some of the pivoting and filtering and some of the things that I just showed you, but it won't change the fact that cash still needs to be reconciled. And so from a capacity standpoint at the county schools office, as Karin mentioned, that it still is ultimately the district's responsibility to reconcile cash. So it may just hopefully, as reports become available, make the reconciliation process go faster. And as the county schools office is able to provide assistance, they may be able to do things more quickly too, just because they have better reports to work with. So check back frequently there. And as I mentioned, warrants, when we hear about potential challenges, particularly from those pilot districts or districts that are on the accounting responsibility plan, they have always reconciled their cash directly to the county treasurer. So this change isn't, while I'm sure it created some challenges, they have always been in the habit of doing these reconciliations. And what they're telling us is that for the most part, it's going very well and it's kind of business as usual. But with warrants, that's where they're seeing some that have cleared the treasurer that aren't or haven't cleared the treasurer that the district is showing, or vice versa. In particular, Fund 30 and 40 might be where you, like I showed, I did have an unreconciled difference. But from an auditor perspective, and what Karen's going to talk about a little bit next is it's always better to at least demonstrate that the reconciliation was done, even if you get down to a small reconciling item. That's better than not having the reconciliation at all. So even though, I was being the auditor that I am and the accountant that I am, I was frustrated that I couldn't get that reconciled quickly down to a zero balance. But at the end of the day, as an auditor, if someone handed me that had $1,000 difference, that's way better than a much larger difference or no reconciliation at all. So with that, I will turn it over to Karen for some of the next slides.
Yes, Jill, that was a great job. I know it's difficult to present it in that way because you were trying to show screenshots, and we had talked a little bit about you try to bring up a spreadsheet. And I know first thing everyone's going to say is send me that spreadsheet. That spreadsheet's not going to help everybody else because that's another district's data. But what Jill was able to do is walk you through how she got to that spreadsheet and how she got that formatted. And that's really what our goal was here, is to give all of the school districts with strategies of how they can essentially perform this more manual process that in the past we may have been able to rely on, like some custom codes and things like that for. And what Jill emphasized, obviously checking back to agency web, because it is changing literally daily, that we are now seeing stale dated warrants get pulled through, things like that. So it is really important to monitor and know that you're pulling the most recent information. And there is some backdating. We saw recently there is some backdating of some transactions. So be cognizant of that. We always say, we don't encourage backdating for a reason. So as you are, checking your balances, if something changes, if you feel like you caught yourself up through March, like the examples that Jill was showing, and then all of a sudden you have a variance in April and you can't identify it, you may need to go back, because it could be that some of that interest may have been posted after you had performed that reconciliation. So it's important to make sure you're constantly monitoring that. So with that, so that leads us to a little bit of, so what happens? We were anticipating questions from everybody as to, well, what's the impact that this is going to have on our individual school district? So we started off talking about the requirements of what the school districts have when it comes to compliance, when it comes to owning those internal controls. So really the range of impact that we're going to see with our school districts here in Maricopa County really is going to vary. It's going to depend on, as Jill said, if nothing has happened with the reconciliations, if the district does nothing, versus if there are some minor non-material type of variances. So non-compliance could result in, what does non-compliance look like for your district could look different depending upon where your district is at. So we're going to start with like the most extreme. So most extreme, if no reconciliation is done, if a school district does not touch the reconciliation and says, there's just not enough time, I'm not going to touch it, then not only is there a USFR compliance questionnaire finding deficiency, we know that, this likely could result in then the material weakness, and potentially even that your audit firm would not be able to render an opinion. They wouldn't be able to opine on your financials, because we don't know if the financials that we're looking at within your general ledger are accurate because you don't have that reconciliation against the bank or against the county treasurer. So material weakness, just to reiterate, the severity of that, that's your probably the most extreme finding that you can have, and not being able to have a clear audit opinion is the most extreme situation that a district could be in. So obviously doing no reconciliation, that's likely what the school district would be looking at. For the most part, a lot of our districts are going to be looking at late reconciliations at this point. We are on May 15th. This conversion happened back in November. So it's very likely that many school districts in Maricopa County are looking at late reconciliations. As Jill said, late is not the end of the world. It's not going to be great. Could there still be a deficiency on the USFR compliance questionnaire? Yes, most likely, because USFR does say that these reconciliations are required to be done on a monthly basis. Now, if the reconciliation ultimately happens and you are able to demonstrate that the district's general ledger is reconciled to the county treasurer, it may not be as severe of a material weakness on your financial statements. So they will deem it not as severe. So late reconciliation, and it's potential that within the USFR compliance questionnaire, yes, we know that the answers are yes and no. It's not almost or just about there. The answer is yes or no. Did the district perform a monthly reconciliation? If the answer is no, there is the option to work with your auditors to, if you did ultimately get them completed and that you were actually reconciled, that answer could be no, it wasn't reconciled. However, the district did ultimately reconcile and there were no material deficiency or no material differences, something to that effect. So it would be less severe than no reconciliation performed at all. And then, as we talked about, if there are unresolved variances, again, that will also likely result in a USFR compliance questionnaire deficiency noted, and the nature and how much that reconciliation, so if we're looking at $1,000, like Jill said, versus $100,000, it's really going to depend on the individual district and, what is that amount in comparison when you look at the materiality for that particular district. So you can see common themes here is that, we're looking at USFR deficiencies, and then the extremeness of the audit finding that may or may not appear in your financial statements is going to really depend upon what type and how quickly districts are able to get their reconciliations performed. Jennifer, you can jump to the next slide. So what is the ripple effect of this? So we know that there are ripple effects within USFR compliance deficiencies, but really what we're concerned more about is the ripple effect of the financial statement audit findings and those internal control deficiencies that a district might have a finding on. So when you have these severe audit findings from a material deficiency, a internal control deficiency, that really can have a longer ripple effect for the district. When a school district sees that, not only is it a finding in the current year, but it increased that risk long term. It increases that risk and that public perception against your stakeholder groups. So when presenting your audits to your governing board, to your community, to other regulators, if you're looking at bond sales and regulators and bond rating agencies are seeing this, we know that there's a ripple effect there. We know that with the single audit, when we have those deficiencies on our financial statements, we know that with our single audit that there's compliance and follow-up that's necessary from a federal perspective. Could there be a potential gap of controls, that there could be a gap of controls where fraud could potentially take place, or the appearance of fraud. So we want to make sure that you're tightening up those controls so that there is not that opportunity for fraud to take place. And ultimately, with a material weakness, when we do have a material weakness of internal controls, what that ultimately does is that puts your district into a high risk category, not just for the year in which the audit is being performed, but it actually is required that trails the district for 2 years. So that results in essentially more audit procedures. So your sample size goes up, the amount of audit procedures that must be performed by the auditors increases. More federal programs would need to be audited. So it has that long-term ripple effect. So what we're ultimately wanting to do to provide this information is to avoid districts from having those material deficiencies on their audits. So understanding the importance of it, understanding the responsibility of it is really what we're trying to communicate here and try to instill upon the districts. Jennifer, we can jump to the next slide. So the next question, and I'm anticipating this question to come up. So what can your auditors do? Jill just walked us through. She did a walkthrough of a district to see what would the procedures be that a school district would need to perform. So we are constantly looking internally as an audit firm. If you are not an audit client of HeinfeldMeech, you have another audit firm. This is the same for all audit firms. So it's not just a HeinfeldMeech rule. This is really the independent standards that all audit firms have to follow. So we have to maintain independence, meaning that your audit firm cannot essentially perform the procedures in which they're going to test the compliance, test those controls. So auditors cannot assume those responsibilities on behalf of the district. So auditors can train you. That's what we're doing right now. We're doing this countywide training. We can certainly provide training on how to reconcile. We can potentially help you dig into and say, okay, so how am I looking at this? How am I going to find where that variance is? Like Jill said, like matching up, pivot tables. What are some of those trainings that could be provided and helping you dig into how to troubleshoot, or what would that correction look like? So you've identified it. How do you go about correcting that? Your audit firm can provide you guidance on ultimately what the district would record in order to make that correction. So those are things that an audit firm can do. What we cannot do on behalf of audit clients, what audit firms cannot do on behalf of their audit clients, is prepare those reconciliations. We cannot actually post those entries. We talk about, the keystrokes. We can't be the ones to actually post those transactions because ultimately your auditors are testing those transactions. So we know that there's going to be a need for support. Jennifer's going to talk a little bit about how the CSS team is going to be supporting those districts that fall underneath the Maricopa County School Superintendent's Office as non-accounting responsible districts. But I know that there's a lot of questions about, so how can we get more resources? What does that look like? So that's just something to keep in mind when talking with your audit teams on what support they can and cannot provide. I'm going to jump to the next slide. So ultimately, when it comes down to it, what are we trying to enforce today or, communicate today is, that the reconciliation is important. Better late than never is like what we like to say. Minor reconciling items are going to be able to be overcome. I'm not going to say that we're going to ignore them and say, okay, let's just move on. We can't tape that, $1.42 to the reconciliation to say, here's the $1.42 that I'm off. Can we move on? So we're still obviously going to have to resolve that. But, the importance is that the district needs to be completing reconciliations and identify, get yourself to zero. If there are minor reconciling items, identify potentially what they are coming from and brainstorm with your audit team as far as how can those be resolved? What are some of those adjustments that can be done? What would be an appropriate adjusting entry? Making sure that you have that documentation, identify that those reconciliations are getting caught up. Ultimately, a complete reconciliation, it's going to provide that internal control representation, that you're able to demonstrate control, that you have that oversight, and that's ultimately what your auditors are going to be looking for. So it'll make your post field work, your on-site time with your auditors a whole lot smoother if you have the reconciliation. Our audit teams here at H&M are aware of this, and we're going to be asking, what is the district doing? How is the district approaching this? If more training is needed, those are things that you can contact your audit team to see, what type of resources are available. So just know that, but just understanding that ultimately we need to make sure that districts have this knowledge and know what needs to be done. So I think, Jennifer, you're going to jump in now and talk a little bit about, so what does this look like for those districts that fall under the county school superintendent's office here in Maricopa County?
Correct. Yes. Thank you, Jill and Karen, and especially Jill walking through all of those steps. We really appreciate all of that. So yes, so some next steps, expectations, and ongoing support that the CSS office is going to provide. We will continue supporting non-accounting school districts through reconciliation review, accuracy, and also posting treasure portal transaction as the capacity allows. So like Jill had mentioned, and same with Karen, we are sometimes a little bit ahead of the treasurer's office. So again, we are trying to work very diligent and closely with them to ensure that whatever is going into the treasurer's office is being fed through my office and then getting posted timely revenues, interest, vouchers, warrants, all of that good stuff. So we will continue to support those non-accounting districts through the reconciliation. And which means that we are also trying to do them as well. So in my office, we've got 36 school districts that we do have to reconcile from November all the way moving up like the rest of everybody up through April as of right now. So please be patient with us. We're trying to work through each school district 1 month at a time to make sure that we're not missing anything. So you will more than likely hear from myself or from the itinerant business managers if you are a non-accounting asking for clarification on items if we do have questions. We will also provide ongoing guidance, communication, and any sort of escalating that needs to happen over at the treasurer's office. Again, my office and I have built such a great relationship with the treasurer's office. They're very responsive, they're very respectful, and they do take the time to help us when we need it. So again, if you're having some trouble reaching out to them, please feel free to reach out to myself or my office. We're more than happy to help step in and get the support that you need. Districts are still expected to manage routine follow-up items, like Karen had said, maintaining that documentation, and also addressing any sort of outstanding reconciling issues. Being able to identify them is better than not having any idea what they are. But again, we will walk alongside you guys, any of the non-accounting districts, and even if you are a pilot and you just need some help, feel free to give us a call. We're more than happy to help. Again, we do this all the time. But we will still continue to follow up with the districts if we do have questions. If we can't find any of the records, you will be hearing from us. Reconciliation timelines and responses obviously are going to be affected a little bit. Like I had mentioned before, we've got 36 districts we're trying to reconcile from November all the way through as of April. And then in just a few short weeks, we'll have to reconciling May as well. So as you all know, time creeps up on us really quickly. So we're trying to get through them. I don't want to say as quickly as possible because we are trying to take our time, making sure that we're catching everything and also making sure that the districts understand where we're coming with these reconciliations when they are getting finished. So again, those timelines are shifting a little bit. We're hoping that being able to do the first few months, November, December, and January, we figured are going to be a little bit rocky just because the system is so new still. But we're hoping that January, February, and each month after that gets to be a little bit easier and easier as we go down the line. You will still receive district updates, or excuse me, updates from my office, CSS, with resources, processing guidance through established communications. So if you have not signed up through MailChimp, is where a lot of our emails come through. So if you do need help with that, I will also provide the link. It is on our schoolsoup.org, our School Soup website as well, and I can post that later. But even if you go to this invite, down at the bottom, it does ask if you want to sign up for the MailChimp. Feel free to sign up for it. If you feel like, hey, I got this forwarded from a friend or a coworker and I want to sign up, that's how you get on. If not, feel free to email myself or my office, anyone in my office, and we can help get you signed up to get on these emails. We do also send individual emails, and we do have team emails as well that I can also post out there online as well. As you all know, and if you don't know, CSS still remains committed to supporting the districts. We want to make sure that we're consistent, we're accountable, and we're also providing operational stability for every single school district of our non-accounting districts. Again, we know that a lot of you rely on us to get these reconciliations done, and trust me, I promise you we are trying to work through them day by day, transaction by transaction, pulling the reports, looking at the reports just like how Jill had walked through. So just know that we are 110% behind those districts and supporting districts. And again, even if you're a pilot district, don't hesitate to reach out. hey, I don't know how to pull this report. Can you help us out? We are more than welcome to help anybody that's willing to call. Like Karen had mentioned, we've got people that are hosted on our box that aren't even in Maricopa County. We've get calls from Flagstaff that are, hey, we're in the system too. We just need a little bit of assistance. We are happy to help anybody that reaches out. Please just keep in mind that there are technically 4 of us, 3 itinerant business managers and myself, and we will try to get back to you as soon as we can. The team is great. They know what they're doing, and we just want to make sure that you guys feel supported along this kind of bumpy road, but I promise we'll get all through it. It'll be good at the end. With that, we've got Q&A. So kind of as I had mentioned, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to say, Jennifer, I know one question that came in that people may not have seen in the chat is a lot of people are asking, was this going to be recorded? Is this recorded? Because as Jill was going through the screenshots and the formulas and all of that, it is being recorded. It's going to be posted, if I'm understanding correctly, Jennifer, over to the Maricopa County School Superintendent's Office website. Correct. And we'll also post a PDF of this presentation so you can put it on your big screen and see the layout and everything that Jill was going through. So we'll make sure that those resources are out there too.
Absolutely. Yep, those will get posted. And then if you are in this, I do believe that the recording gets posted as well. If not, again, I will get it posted to the School Soup website and then also send out the link for that as well, where you can access it, pause as you need, fast forward, rewind, replay as many times as you want.
So we do have a little bit of time on the agenda. We've got a few minutes. We intentionally didn't keep this just to the 1 hour because we expected, doing the walkthrough was going to take a few extra minutes there. So we do have a little bit of time. We don't have any direct questions dropped into the Q&A yet. But as Jennifer mentioned, we did drop in our 3 email addresses. If there's questions, from a compliance perspective, what is this going to look like from an audit perspective, or questions about that, you're welcome to reach out to Jill or myself. If you got more, maybe like county CSS office specific type questions, feel free to reach out to Jennifer. I think what our plan is based off of questions that come in. If there are some FAQs that we're starting to see more and more of, that we will try to get some FAQs posted over to the county school superintendent's office as well. Yes. So we don't have a crystal ball. The big question is, well, when are we going to see reports? I believe, Jennifer, if I'm not mistaken, there was some discussions of individual districts being able to reach out directly to the county treasurer's office. So that's one of the things we could post is, which email are you requesting? So we can make sure that information gets posted if folks want to reach out directly to the county treasurer's office.
Yep, absolutely.
Maybe we can pause here to see if there's any questions from the attendees. So if you want to drop anything into the Q&A, and if not, we'll give you back 17 minutes of your Friday afternoon.
So Karen, I am seeing a few questions in the Q&A. Do you see
I see them coming in. Now I do. Yep. I see
okay.
them through now. Yep. I just clicked on them. They were popping up, and now I see them coming through.
Okay. Yeah, I see a few on here that we could probably tackle.
Yep, absolutely. So question about, and I think, Jill, this is something that you identified as you were kind of working through your example. When you see that a number of warrants are paid, can we see exactly which of those warrants are paid? So when you say, and I think you saw this in one of your examples, 7 warrants got paid, but which 7 warrants got paid? Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I don't think we can see that yet because the warrant listing is not available yet. Another question, do we get penalized for not having monthly reconciliations done timely throughout the year, or as long as they're completed by the audit timeline? So I think we kind of touched upon that yes, there will likely still be a USFR compliance deficiency if the reconciliations were not done timely, although the extremeness of that, if they ultimately are done, won't be as extreme. But the USFR compliance questionnaire is still a yes/no question of, did the district do this on a monthly basis? So if it's not done timely, that will likely still be a deficiency for the school district. But again, the extremeness of potentially a material deficiency of not doing it is a worst case scenario. Okay, looking at a couple of the other questions here. Another question, until the reports are available, can we get a crosswalk for the object codes to visions? Jennifer, I believe we have that. We actually used that back when we were doing the Quasi-Meyer webinar almost, I think it was just about, 2 years ago to the day.
Yes.
So I think that would be something that we could post as maybe an FAQ. What are those? That's crosswalk.
Absolutely. And I am 99.9% sure that it is posted on the School Soup website. But again, yep, we can include that in the FAQ. That's a great question.
Yes. So a couple questions about, I think we touched upon this. Some of these questions came in a little bit earlier before we were going through the examples. And some questions about that the downloads are different. The system is different. I see there's a question here about how the data is actually formatted within Agency Web. Looks a little bit different.
Yeah, and Karen, that was something that I noticed when I would run the summary version and then compare it to the detailed version. They didn't always match. And it did appear to be related to the date that things were being posted, that sometimes even though I would put in a date of 3/31, there would be still transactions that would show up that were dated in April. So that is just a nuance that we've noted, and hopefully will be fixed and worked on, as time goes on. But at least I was able to tell in most cases where the difference was due to. It was just a timing of, should this transaction really be considered an April or a March?
And there were some questions about if interest is still going to be backdated and if there are transactions that are still going to be backdated. I don't think we can speak on behalf of the treasurer, but we are seeing that there are some backdating of transactions. I know that we've seen some transactions with some terminology maybe that districts aren't used to, particularly in the debt service fund. And I believe that the treasurer was in the process of reversing some of those transactions and reposting them as property tax collection. So I think that was more so in like the March, April timeframe that we saw some of those. So we know that it's a moving target. We're acknowledging that. Unfortunately, that doesn't remove the compliance side of it with the system conversion. And I know that's a very frustrating part on behalf of everybody who's involved with this. I think we've addressed most of the questions here. I'm just skimming through them real quickly. Not refreshing as quickly as I thought it was going to. If you are identifying that the county treasurer is posting something to the wrong object code, I would strongly recommend reaching out, because you're probably not alone. I know those are some of the ones that we've identified, and we reached out to the county treasurer. And rather than each individual district needing to know that that was wrong, we suggested that they pull it back. So on the next month, they do a reversal of it and correct it on behalf of all the districts. I see a question here about possibly access. So if you're not seeing something for your particular district, it might be an access issue that you might need to make sure that your access is providing you with access to the right areas within Agency Web. Okay, I don't see anything else coming in right now. So we will, as Jennifer mentioned, I think everybody who signed up for the webinar automatically gets an email indicating that the webinar would be recorded and you'll get a copy to the link, and then it'll also be posted. So if you have folks within your office who didn't sign up for it to get the email, it'll be open to pretty much anybody available. So question about what does Maricopa County School Superintendent's Office still provide reconciliation reports? So Jennifer, your itinerants are intending to still provide reconciliation reports. Whether, how quickly they're all going to get caught up, I think is, no
the
pun
big
intended,
question.
but the $1 million question right now.
Yes,
So,
feel free to reach out to me. My email's still right up here. But yes, those do still go out to the non-accounting districts that we support.
Yes. Okay.
So I don't think mine's also updating as fast as yours, Karen. So I'm trying to refresh it as quick as I can to see if any more Q&A are coming in.
Yes, I see one. Kathy's asking if backdating can be eliminated. I think we can definitely provide that recommendation to the county treasurer's office that, we're asking that no more backdating, date at current date, as we strongly encourage everybody to date their transactions, their journal entries, current date. I think we can certainly, as Jennifer mentioned, she has a very strong rapport with the treasurer's office. I think that can certainly be something that we ask, that they don't backdate the transactions any further. We can't speak on behalf of them, but I think we can certainly advise that.
Yes. Well, it looks like that, unless I'm not seeing any more, Karen and Jill, is there any last minute things that you'd like to throw in there before? And if not, we can give them back 7 minutes on a Friday, right before the weekend. Fortunately, not a holiday weekend yet, but still a Friday at the least.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to say thank you again to everybody that was able to attend. Jill and Karen, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your guys' busy day. We all know that it's auditing season and time right now. And just to reiterate that this will be posted online and the link will go out. I appreciate everyone that was able to attend and join. Feel free to write down the email addresses. If you do need any help, feel free to reach out to Karen and Jill for more of the auditing side, and then myself, and we can get you hooked up with the right itinerant business managers over in CSS for any sort of questions on reconciling and any assistance needed. With that, a whole 6 minutes is going back to everybody, so I hope everyone enjoys their weekend. Stay safe, get enough relaxing time, and back to it on Monday. Everyone have a great one. Take care.